So, in this room today, actually in the back as well, I see everyone here, of course, but these guys are all focusing on what's really happening behind the scenes, right? Really what's going on. We have some incredible speakers here that are going to give their thoughts on really the tangibles, right? What's actually going on? Is everything fine? That's the question we're here to answer today. So I'm going to just quickly introduce everyone. Normally in panels, people introduce themselves, but if you have Americans, they spend about 20 minutes introducing themselves, like, oh, I went to this school, I'm from like Alabama, like Roll Tide, and they go on and on and on. So I'll just quickly introduce everyone. We have Vaughan on the end from Butter Money. Please say hello.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you. Please pass it. We have Do, the co-founder of Stable Labs. Please say hello.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you. We have Rolf, a summoner from Mets Cartel Ventures.
Hello.
And we have Q from Stake DAO.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Thank you. Yeah, guys, these aren't going to amplify your voice, so you actually have to speak loud still.
Yeah, whatever is what he said.
Whatever. No worries. First of all, I think the real pressing question which people want to speak about is, do we see any future in DAOs? And if so, what is that going to look like? I'd like you to draw inspiration from current DAOs that you believe are working, or that you've invested in, or that you're directly working with, and maybe highlight some of the reasons why you believe fundamentally they are different from 99% of DAOs that seem to be floundering and failing. Would anyone like to start? Do, let's go.
Yeah.
Hi. So can you guys hear me? Yeah. Yes. And then if I have a accent, I'm sorry, but I don't have the sexy French accent. So you guys need to deal with it. But yeah, actually, I would say that it's pretty interesting. Like we've been working with a lot of different DAOs, and I've also been talking with a lot of them. I think we're definitely going to see actually DAOs moving into two extremes. So one is actually, I think, they're becoming a little more centralized, actually. And the one is becoming more decentralized. But the idea of decentralization is very subjective. But to start with the easy one, like in terms of becoming more decentralized, would be DAOs, for example, trying to give more control to the community, actually respecting some of the governance decisions. But other DAOs, I think they also came to the conclusion that whatever they do, it's very difficult to the community to actually lead their initiative. Plus, I think that some came to the conclusion that even if they try to decentralize, either it's too late or they will still get into trouble from the government. So what they want to do is they basically want to centralize the decision power. So we're actually seeing like some of the DAOs that basically they might still have the governance, but at the end of the day, the decision is still by the team. So we're going to see those become more extreme, especially I know they both the legal side and others are fluctuating, but I think that we're going to see those like two extremes. So
Do, at Stable Lab, you work with 1inch and a bunch of different protocols. You're one of the most prominent recognized delegates in this space. What DAOs are you currently working with where you're like, oh yeah, this is completely decentralized decision making right now?
So I think that it's pretty controversial because the thing is like, for example, we're working with over 25 DAOs, and we like to say MakerDAO being one of the more decentralized ones. But I know that some people might go boo, or if DJ Spartan is here, he might make fun of me. But here's the reason, because the thing is like for Maker, even Rune, right? Like who's the founder at MakerDAO, who holds almost like 8 to 9% of the total Maker supply and basically most of the voting power. Even he needs to go through the voting decision to get his wish or let's say his opinion heard. So basically the idea is that for Maker, the decision basically respect that, so they have to go through governance process. In a lot of DAOs, they don't even bother with it, right? Because even if there's a decision by the DAO, they just say, oh, this doesn't make sense, so we just don't respect it. For Maker, even like so I think that some of the recent examples, like for example, Endgame, also kind of show this, right? We basically had a bunch of proposals that cut like half of members at Maker. The team could just say that like they don't want to respect it, but no, they saw the vote pass and they packed their bag and went home.
Interesting. Does anyone have a take on that?
No, I think what he says is interesting because if you look at DAOs and you take the point of like what's decentralized, the question is what exactly is decentralized within DAOs, and not everything has to be decentralized. I think that's one takeaway. And just like from I guess the expertise from my perspective, which is investment DAOs, is one thing that has worked in terms of decentralization and has worked for DAOs is attracting capital and attracting it very quickly and attracting members. And the third thing that has worked for investment DAOs is access to deal flow. Now, this is not for all investment DAOs. Obviously, MCV is probably one of the earlier ones, had a benefit with that. But even more recently, the second iteration of Metacata Ventures, which is Hydra, also has had really good deal flow. Raising was relatively easy, and getting a diverse membership together has also been very easy.
Fascinating. And obviously, Q, you also work at a quasi-investment DAO. You're not using a Moloch framework or a traditional VC framework, but in some sense, you're really moving the markets at stake DAO. You guys use a lot of size, you're in a lot of delegation protocols. What is your opinion on what these guys say?
Yeah, I mean, just to come back maybe a little bit from like where we are seeing like the DAOs coming, like, or what are the ones that are gonna actually probably succeed in the future. For me, what's really important is really to see like a on-chain governance, like Curve being one of them. I think like the fact that every single decision that is taken by the DAO is automatically executed by the protocol, and you don't have to rely on any team members to actually execute a vote is a major thing, because we've seen so many votes which are uniquely there just to virtue signal something, but actually are not executed by the team later on, are happening like way too much. So for me, but this is something which is like requiring a lot of effort and dev work and audits and stuff like that before it actually works. But you only have a handful of them, and that's the reason why, like, for me, like, the model of DAOs, I mean, for having experience and built like a mini DAOs, like with StackDAO, Blackpool, and also like Rect, and see how you can try to organize people which are working actually for the protocol, but also like your community. I could say that DAOs work until that it doesn't. Like for most of it, like a DAO system is not the correct system, and unless you have like the sufficient dev power and use case for an on-chain governance.
I see Doe's got thoughts on this.
You should go back if you've got something you need to say.
you can say first. It's okay.
Yeah,
So obviously, Vaughan, you spent a lot of time lubricating the inners of DAOs and thinking about all these problems.
I guess my approach would be slightly different. If just thinking about which DAOs you work in, where you see lots and lots of decentralization, and I'd always just question what the decentralization is for. And there are some DAOs which are organizations where the governance of that DAO needs to be decentralized, and it makes the DAO able to operate, or the protocol able to operate. And there's lots of protocols that don't need the DAO. They don't need any.
Can you give an example?
No, because I think that to do that would maybe call out people who are working on things. I think that the idea would be there are some things like, say, Ethereum, where there is a significant amount of decentralized decision making. People would not look at Ethereum and call it a DAO. I would look at Ethereum and call it a DAO. Same as Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no real hub that's making decisions, arguably. But it does have a set of miners who are making decisions about blocks, what transactions go into blocks. It does have developers who are making decisions about what code gets updated. Miners are making decisions about which code gets added, right? So they see the new update, they can just reject it. And if there's enough of them that don't want to take it, they can just reject it. And then you have like users, right? Like if Bitcoin is not actually doing things that people want, they can reject it. They don't have to use it. They don't have to buy Bitcoin and so on. And so there, I think decentralization is actually doing something very useful for Bitcoin to survive. Like if they don't have that decentralization, Bitcoin falls apart. And I think there are other protocols maybe where a DAO is really being used mostly for like, people just say like regulatory arbitrage or whatever. And I think there maybe decentralization is being like forced in to try and give the team some optionality that they wouldn't have if they were in a normal corporation. And I think that's probably the most important place to start. Like, is decentralization useful for the protocol? Does it make the protocol better? And it's not for me just, oh, they have token governance, so they're a DAO. And I think that's probably I feel like in this whole ecosystem, we've looked at DAOs because they say the word DAO in them. And then we've said, well, people have built DAOs, so now we have to look at the problems in DAOs. And then now we need to go and solve those problems. It's like, well, maybe the problem is that they don't need to be a DAO. Like, and I think it's really important because I think we're all getting kind of confused. Like, what stuff should we be working on? Which things are decentralized? Why are they decentralized? That feels like the first thing to do. And I think we can see corporations and like corporations as a way of organizing people and human activity. And we can say some of those should not be corporations. You can start a company. It doesn't mean it should really be a company. It doesn't make any money. And then you shut it down. I think it's fine to have DAOs that aren't DAOs that don't work. But we probably should make sure we're not focusing on them and trying to fix their problems because they're not problems worth fixing, I guess.
I think this is an interesting case. So if you think Bitcoin is a DAO, then Bitcoin as a collective could not exist unless it continues to exist the way that it does. So some DAOs, not all DAOs, will not end up being DAOs. Because, I mean, if Bitcoin, the asset, is the product of Bitcoin, the network, which is organized as a bunch of individuals who basically do not trust each other. I mean, the reason why I run Bitcoin is because I don't trust anyone else to be running nodes. And that's the very point, is right? Don't trust, verify. That system couldn't exist otherwise unless it was there to support a singular asset. Which, going back to your question, I think DAOs are most powerful if we don't create an organization for an organization's sake, but we create an organization because we want to deliver some kind of product or service. And a DAO isn't the only thing that can deliver that product or service, but under certain circumstances, it's just better than alternatives. Not always, but sometimes.
Please.
Yeah. So I just want to, I guess, provide a different perspective to what Q said about the DAO being dysfunctional, which is also, I think, something that's contrary to what most people think about DAOs. So we like to think having ideal DAO as something that's very smooth, right? All the decisions or people have different interests, like, aligned. But I think in reality, DAOs, as they become more mature, are actually more dysfunctional. So this is kind of odd, but at the same time, if you look at more mature democracies around the world, it's the same. If you, for example, look at US and look at, for example, how, let's say, both parties fight, or like they have scandals or others, or let's say compared to others, and then you compare to, let's say, dictatorship, where such discussion are usually just like there's no really active discussion, then you kind of realize that actually having that kind of conflict and like what we consider as dysfunctional is actually a healthy sign of DAOs having different interests, kind of checking and balancing each other. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like dysfunctional. And I think that some form of dysfunctional is also needed as well. Because if you think about it, if there's something that actually prevents something from getting done, that means that there's some kind of check and balances to ensure that only if it's an interest that all of the participants agree to, then it's something they can do it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's it was actually not something that I was thinking about, but then as we help with different protocols, we realized that the conclusion was actually contrary to what we thought.
Thanks. Really interesting. So recently, just a show of hands from the audience, has anyone seen what happened to Barnbridge or Faye? Yep, everyone. So the A in DAO stands for autonomy, right? And everyone in this room should know that it's not the autonomous part, it's the sovereignty part from the countries. And we've mentioned some DAOs like Curve and MakerDAO. I'm curious, have we reached true autonomy from any jurisdiction yet with any DAOs?
I don't think so, but I don't know if we should or if that's possible. So the underlying doctrine is code is law, but just like if you come to my home, and so if you're in Asia, for example, you have to take off your shoes. So if you come to my home, you're going to have to take off your shoes, right? Even if you don't want to take off your shoes. But if I just hit you on the head, then, or if I kill you, there's a law outside my house. So there's a certain law on chain that we can follow, but that itself is embedded within a larger system. So I think the idea that code is law and then that's the only thing that matters and nothing else can impinge upon it doesn't accept that all systems are somewhat related. So I don't know if we can reach full autonomy, is my answer.
Do you have some thoughts on this?
So sorry to jump in here. I think that the autonomy part is really the important part of DAOs. And I do think that beyond code is law, there is a level of autonomy that you can reach, even while working in existing systems. There are limits. You can't get rid of criminal law. I can't kill you and say, we agreed to do that. That wouldn't work. But there is, you can push it, right? You can push it. And as far as private law is concerned, there's a lot of autonomy that you can reach, I think, with DAOs. And I think we haven't really reached that yet.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add on to that? Do we have any fully autonomous DAOs, independent of any jurisdiction, away from the SEC? Vaughan?
If you accept that Bitcoin is a DAO, then you could argue that Bitcoin has this property.
Yeah.
but only if you accept that. And I think that I think Bitcoin is unique in that it doesn't have this like initial, there had to be a company first. And I think that's really, it's really quite powerful. I wonder if you could say it's like sovereign, but then I don't know where, can anybody claim it fully? Because I think that some people can claim some elements of it. Some parts of the organization, Bitcoin, are exposed because they exist within some regulatory framework, right? So if the SEC says like Bitcoin's not a security, they still had to pass that judgment. They still had to interact with the laws of the United States of America. And I think that's probably, you could say that autonomy is mostly just that there's no one nation that can claim sovereignty over the network. So I feel like you could argue that just by building things on top of a blockchain, you can get some sort of sovereignty if you design the organization correctly. So maybe.
Great point.
Sure.
I think that's right on the money. I think if you think about Bitcoin, when I first learned about it, it got me excited because it was decentralized and autonomous. And when we started thinking about building a DAO around the idea of pharmaceuticals, it was really difficult to deal with all the DAOs I was seeing because, in my mind, all of them were centralized at some level. There was somebody controlling something, getting paid or doing something within the DAO, and it looked like a company to me, but it wasn't a functional company, it wasn't making a lot of profit, and they all died. So when we went into this, we really were a for-profit company, right? We're a biotech company. There's no biotech companies here. I'm one. It's coming up with this idea of saying, use on-chain, decentralized, autonomous treasuries to fuel the creation of things that people need, i.e. pharmaceuticals in this case, but it could be other things, and having the people decide what they want or what they need. So everybody in this room depended on Pfizer and Moderna to give them vaccines during the pandemic. That's what you did. And you paid for it, believe me, you paid for it, big time. 48 billion net for Pfizer's bank. That's what you gave. It was coming from us. So wouldn't it be amazing if we said, well, screw that, let's make our own treasury, have our own control over it, like Bitcoin, have it, people can vote on it, and use it for when we need, let's say, a therapeutic instead of a vaccine, because no pharma company would ever make a therapeutic, no money in it. But a vaccine selling for $23 a shot, which is just water, pretty good margin there. So these are the things that went through my head during the pandemic because it really inspired me to do something. But I love this concept of being autonomous, decentralized treasury. Call it a DAO, don't call it a DAO, make it a foundation, make it whatever is legal. I don't think it matters, but you guys have power in there.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that the like sovereignty question is mostly a question of like how exposed, for me, it's just how exposed you are to different nations. And I think that is broken right now just because you have like founders starting things and getting investment from VCs, setting up companies, and then trying to go and exit to DAOs. And I think that's like maybe like an initial conditions question.
So my question to all of you, and I thank you for bringing up Bitcoin, which is like, let's take Ethereum. It feels like Ethereum's like pretty decentralized right now. It feels like it is the original DAO in some sense. And we kind of vote through like stake, right? And we vote through validation nowadays. And it seems like this is like the ultimate level of delegation, right? The fundamentals, when we're actually validating networks to some extent. I think Doe might agree or disagree with this. I'm curious, like, would we use Ethereum if we didn't believe it was autonomous from everything else? Like, would we still use Ethereum if we believed that the SEC could just like take it and stop it? Like,
I think that's an interesting question, but I think that in practice, I think we would still use it. I mean, the reason is I think we have seen that even for blockchains that are very, like, arguably more centralized, people still use it, right? Like, or people trade it at least. And if you think about it, like, you know, when people, yeah, like, I mean, you know, one of the good example, you know, which is especially in Korea, I hear from taxi drivers to my parents is like Ripple, right? Like people talk about Ripple, and I mean, from people in DeFi, like we think that Ripple is very centralized, but for them, they don't even know what that is. Like they don't even know what Ripple is. They just buy it because it goes up. Similar to. So I mean, in that way, I know that I'm being a little bit actually it's not sarcastic. It's actually true, but at the same time, like so developers who are developing it, like if let's say foundation or the team was willing to fund a lot, like I'm pretty sure that there will be some developers that are developing on it, right? So although there will be fewer people using, let's say, Ethereum or develop on it, if the question is like, are people still going to use it? I would say the answer is yes, because at the end of the day, from the, let's say, yes, there are some developers that are focusing a lot on the philosophy part, but there are also a lot of developers and there are also teams that are focusing on the, especially how to access the mainstream. And then if for them that being mainstream is something that more important, and they don't like, even if it's something the government is able to attack, they don't care, then I think they will still do it. Yeah.
Really quick, I think I actually always kind of wanted one of the governments to try to take over one of these networks, whether it be Bitcoin or Ethereum, because I think from an economic standpoint, the amount of money that you have to pay is greater than the amount of money that you'll make, number one. Number two is forkability. Fundamentally, I don't believe in Bitcoin because it's a specific repo on GitHub. The fact that I can fork it and that we can all fork it together means that the Bitcoin that I believe in is a Bitcoin that is rooted in social consensus. It's not rooted in a specific repo. But I could copy that repo very easily. And in fact, I have a version of the repo on an air-gapped computer. Not that I don't think I'll ever need it, but that's the first thing, right? So I don't think I care as much about autonomy in as much as, will a state take one over? Kind of do that. I think you'll pay for it much more than it's worth. But what's more important to me is the decentralized part. The fact that we can yank it back up for almost no cost, very cheaply.
Yeah, just to come back on Du's point, when he says that, some developers would actually develop on a chain which is less centralized. I totally agree. I mean, look at what's happening right now with Phantom, right? I don't know if you heard about the news with Phantom. Yeah.
Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, there have been the founder of multi-chain that just got taken by the Chinese police, and right now, pretty much all. I mean, he was controlling all the validators, as far as I know, and
That's his sister as well.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everything is all the funds on Phantom are pretty much stranded right now, but people still put a lot of money there, and that was the same case on Binance, Binance Chain. People don't care. I mean, in this room, I think maybe we are in some way purists or advanced people, but for me, a lot of it is gambling and crypto, just trying to get rich quick. And if I'm a developer that just want to get some quick bucks, I'm just gonna fork Aave, for example, and create Geist on Phantom, and just make a quick bucks and just you reiterate. So there is in this room we might be purists, but a lot of people don't care, and also a lot of users don't care, because for example, they were saying, oh yeah, Ethereum is too expensive. Yes, it's freaking expensive, and it's only for whales. But and people were when I was trying to bring people into crypto, and I said, oh yeah, but I don't want to use Ethereum. I want to use Binance Chain because this is freaking cheap, and they were just flipping shitcoin on PancakeSwap. Yeah, and we were in a way I was dying, but inside, because that was not part of my ethos, but when I was seeing so many people flocking to that chain, I mean, yeah. So it is a spectrum, and we have to accept that although we are a little bit purist and we say, oh, we want decentralization, blah, 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 full sovereignty, the reality is most people don't care. They don't care. They just want to make a quick buck, and they just want to trade or do whatever on chain, and they don't want to have a really shitty UX. That's it.
Can I just respond to that, because I think I agree, but then I think about Solana, and I think
Sorry, earlier you said I don't want to name any names, and now you're like, oh fuck it, Solana.
Well, this is not an attack on Solana, right? I'm just going to make the comparison, which is Solana makes different trade-offs to Ethereum. One of them being centralization, and then the chain halts. So you're saying I think the question is decentralization valuable enough? So I think it's not whether you tell a user, hey, use Ethereum because it's decentralized, because we're purists. It's more decentralization is valuable. It gives you something. Sovereignty is valuable. It gives you something. So when the nation state decides to let's attack this DAO, let's attack this protocol. It's some of them they can't attack. Bitcoin is not a security. Yeah, it can't attack it. It's not valuable to attack it. Who are you gonna sue? Who are you going to take to court? Who's gonna pay damages? I think that's the difficulty. It's some of these. I was thinking before about governance, and I was thinking about your point around conflict. And I was thinking the reason why it's so valuable that we all have like governance rights in the places we grew up is that if something was so bad, like so egregious, we'd have a way to vote, even if we never use the vote. So we have the potential to vote. In the same way that like one of the DAO with the most governance adoption, I guess, is ENS. And it's only really because there was like a really bad thing that everybody wanted to stop. And so that a bunch of people jumped in, and like, so conflict is what kind of creates governance, right? And I think this is my point, that if you look at Ethereum and you say maybe most people don't value the cost of sovereignty, of decentralization, fine. They'll go use like BNB chain, they'll go use like Solana, whatever. But then eventually something will happen where they'll realize the downside, that like, oh, this actually doesn't give me what I want, I need to use Ethereum.
You have a response?
No. I mean, this is a. I mean, it's a little bit different. Maybe I'm taking a tangent, and I'm not sure this is relevant. But like you say, like, if there is some things that I don't like, I can vote against it. But like, I mean, these are like really specific like tokenomics that we are seeing, like a V tokenomics, a curve tokenomics, and we are seeing like on-chain bribing appearing. And it's kind of fun to see that. Like people, like most of the people actually say, oh yeah, we want governance right or whatever. But again, right now, most of them don't care about the governance rights. All they care about is how much am I going to get for my bribes on chain. And this is like something. This is, I mean, at the same time, it's fascinating, but like it's also like it can be really scary, because you just maybe like at some point, like the cost of bribing would be sufficient to attack a protocol in itself.
A quick point. So I think the point of both decentralization, and I'll bring it back to the comment you just made with bribing, is to offer choice. Choice when you typically don't have a choice. So in most centralized system where there's a single person in control, they make a choice that affects you, right? So I actually don't have a problem with people going on chain and gambling, or like, V token economics. If that is what you want to do, I'll let you do that. And you can do that, right? And that's up to you if you want to go gamble. I don't like gambling because mathematically I know I lose, right? Generally speaking, right? Or maybe I'm a bad gambler, right? I'm just really bad at it, right? But I think to go back to the point, I think we have to separate the value we attach to certain choices to what does decentralization allow us. And it gives us a choice to go after whatever we choose to do. And I don't have to agree with the choice that you make, but you can make that choice. And I can take that away from you very easily. It's very, very difficult. I think that's really powerful to me.
Thank you, Rolf. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to different topics. So, I hear a lot of chat and discussion around how to tackle things such as voter apathy. And I just want to read a quote by the late, great Osho. He said, because democracy basically means that it's government by the people, of the people, for the people, but the people are retarded. When it comes to protocol level decisions, cryptographic decisions, changing fundamentals of what's happening, it seems to me as though 99% of the people aren't competent and shouldn't be contributing to the conversation, let alone voting. Even when it comes to delegating to some of the people up here, how do they know what they're doing even makes any sense? So I have two questions to the panel. A, should we be trying to get more engagement into the DAOs? And B, should we be trying to fix voter apathy, the amount or the percentage of people holding tokens who should vote? Oh yeah, he's going to go straight for this one. Go ahead, though.
People should delegate.
Yeah. To me. To me.
I know this is being recorded, so I have to be very politically correct. Don't worry.
Sean had himself, so you don't have.
No worries. But I know that we like to make fun of, like, especially the retail, right? Like, if you go to the forum, a lot of people will be like, okay, so that's great. So when are you guys going to be listed on Binance? Or be like, okay, when are you going to burn your tokens? Or be like, is founder dead yet? Or something like that, right? Like, they ask, like, there's those questions. But at the same time, the reason why we want them to participate, so I think that we need to kind of separate this, right? The question is, like, so why do they want them to participate in the first place? And the second one is that, so, like, what are some of the ways to do that, right? Because I think we need to separate those, right? Because it's true that a lot of those participants, they're very speculative, but at the same time, they also help to provide some of the insight as well as ask, for example, how the budget is going. Some of the examples, not just Maker, but I think so Uniswap is also another good example, right? Because Uniswap also had a very big grant program, and then a lot of those grants were sometimes worth millions. That's great. The problem was that nobody questioned them, right? So nobody asked questions. So usually it just kind of went through. And then after it went through, nobody really questioned about, okay, where's the money's going, how it was spent. It was also the same thing happening on, for example, Harmony, side as well, right? So yes, their participation itself might not be so technical or let's say advanced, but asking such questions are important because if you have enough people asking it, that they need to come up with the answer, right? And then, yes, we have some people in Maker who respond by they cannot respond because they're too high. That's a rigid response. But you can imagine that at least it kind of brings up the kind of element of accountability as well as transparency, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is that, yes, it's a very difficult problem to solve because it's something that's also very common in traditional political system, right? Like most people don't vote. I know that they like to put the sticker, but that's only few for Instagram, right? So in that case, then how can we really encourage it? And I think that we have seen many different cases, but what we see...
Why should we encourage it?
Well, it's related to the first question, which is that the more people participate, the more, like, even if their feedback is garbage, okay, I shouldn't say garbage, it's not so highly valued
So
by
political.
certain...
You've turned into a politician, though. What happened?
I mean, that's what politicians do. Yeah, do. Okay. But, also, I'm still sober. I haven't had the beer, so I need to be very correct. But, yeah, so you can imagine, like, even if their opinions might be a little biased or misguided, you can, but you can imagine that having, like, more people ask those questions is important itself because then they have to respond to it. So, like, for example, whether that's like Maker or Uniswap or even your DAOs, you have a lot of people asking for budgets. They want to have, let's say, different integrations. And then this is also problematic for the proposal as well, right? Like, for example, let's say I'm a project. I want to, let's say, onboard to this new chain. And then I want to get a, let's say, grant. I put up a proposal. What happens? Nobody comments on it. And then I'm like, okay, I want to get feedback. Nobody want to give me a feedback. So I go, and then I put a proposal. And then what happens? The voting fails. And then I ask, okay, so why did you guys vote against it? Nobody responds, right? So it's like having the girlfriend that's mad at me, but doesn't tell me why she's mad at me. So I have to go to Google and be like, okay, why is she mad at me? I have to look for like 20 reasons, right?
So, don't have a girlfriend back.
That's that story now. But anyway, anyway, the point is, so you can imagine that it's not good for the project, right? Because if they're at least able to participate and like share for example, like I'm voting against it because I don't like your name, or maybe they're like, okay, because you killed my cat. I don't know what the reason is, but at least they can explain it. Then at least the proposal can improve upon it, right? So that's why it's important to improve such participation. But since I spoke too long, so I'm just going to give others to talk first.
Thank you.
So I don't think that increasing the raw number of people that vote, i.e., the way that you tend to calculate it is like, okay, we have 100 token holders. We got to increase the number of people that vote among those 100. I don't think why should that be a goal in and of itself? Instead, what we should do is we should make that the people that do vote are representative of the whole. So that's the first thing, right? So mathematics, the central limit theorem says that if you pick 30 random people on average, you'll get a representative sample of a much bigger population, which is really great, right? Because if you have, for example, voting schemes, even before a president is being voted on, you have Gallup that goes out and asks like 1,000 people that they pick, well, what do you think are the results going to be? And they're pretty accurate typically in predicting what the results are going to be, right? So the first answer to your question is, should we increase the percentage of people voting in and of itself? No, because it could be a whole bunch of people who are either of the same type, right? Whales, as an example, or it could be a bunch of biased people, right? What we should do is we should do a representative sampling. An example of that with MMCV is if we had a soft poll sometimes within Discord for investing or not investing into something, and then when we did vote on chain, because it's costly, not everyone would vote if they already knew that the decision was representative of what the population wanted it to be, right? Second, I think the solution that I personally think is going to be the solution for DAOs in the future is you will have everyone voting, which I think should always be a function, but rarely so, on very general decisions. So someone who may be biased can still and should still be able to make a decision on very broad strategic decisions, such as Twitter turning off its API or not, or Reddit monetizing its API or not. I think every user should be able to vote on that. I don't think they should be able to vote who's going to be the COO that's being hired or fired. So I think certain decisions should be left to expert groups that make decisions very, very frequently about very tactical things. However, everyone should be able to vote on something that matters to everyone, that's highly strategic. And within that, not every single person needs to vote, as long as we make sure that it's a representative sample that votes.
Thank you, Rolf. Vaughan, would you like to add to this?
You go first.
Do either of you have a counter argument to Rolf?
Yeah, I know that.
Okay.
You should go.
Actually, do you want to speak first? Because
Yeah,
I
no,
spoke.
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make it quick. Yeah, sorry
Take
for
your time, take your
talking
time.
too
We have
much.
lots of time.
Yeah, but actually, so I must admit that it sounds very attractive. That like having somebody that's expert to take care of it, like you don't need many. But then the reality that we saw was that, so there's also a reason why it's very difficult to have a political system just run by experts in the very long term. The reason is that they're very easily to be corrupt and also collude, like especially when nobody's like watching them, because the thing is like the idea of expert is a little bit subjective. But let's say they are indeed the expert, that's great. But from the expert, you're now managing, for example, talking about budgets, you're talking about some of these new relationships. And then we have seen that indeed with DAOs, like not just like, for example, more mature DAOs like Maker, but to like newers or like, like you can imagine that human nature itself is that if you have the control and nobody's watching you, then you have the temptation to basically abuse your power. And then even if you abuse your power, if there's no accountability or like nobody watching you, like it doesn't matter if their opinions are misguided. Like, in this case, those like small voters or others, like their opinions are misguided or even wrong. It's like if there's nobody that's there to challenge you, then you basically are more likely to abuse that power. So that's, I think, the kind of the way that I kind of want to disagree, which is like, yes, of course, it's nice to have more experts in there. But if you just say, oh, for this one, we should just let the expert decide, then the question becomes, well, but we need to make sure that they are being, I know it's kind of weird to say, like who watches the Watchmen, but it's kind of needed to have somebody to watch them in a way.
Okay, quick response. I think that's a great point, but it's a theoretical point. Meaning in practice, no one can vote on everything at all points in time. So you have to delegate, just for practical reasons. There's limited time in the day, and there's limited attention, right? You just literally can't pay attention to all things, and if so you have to delegate at some point. Whether they're experts or not is another question, but when you delegate, I think the key point that crypto enables, unlike any other system, so why are we voting on chain as opposed to not? It's because I can take my vote back at any one point in time. French people voted for Macron. They're protesting in the streets because they can't take their vote back. That dude's going to remain president unless a lot more people start going on the streets and a lot more shit happens, right? So in crypto, the ability to be able at almost any point in time take back your voice or exit, right? Loyalty, voice, and exit from Alfred Hirschman, quite literally, is I think one of the most powerful features that we can have that we wouldn't otherwise have. The fact that we have to delegate so shit gets done, there's no other way to do that. If all employees of Walmart could never manage all the decisions that need to be made for Walmart in a day.
Yeah. That's theoretical.
Quite practical, right? Like, I mean, we're going to put that up on the board, right? Snapshot.
Where's the proof? Sorry, yeah.
I mean, one thing that that we saw actually in terms of governance and delegation is like if you get, I mean, delegation is nice, and also like we are doing that with TechDAO. Like we are voting on, well, voters can delegate the curve power or like the balancer or FXS to us, and we're gonna vote on their behalf, and we're gonna try basically like our metrics more or less is like to maximize the value of the bribes for them. But if like, and right now like these markets like they are like fairly, I would say not, they're not fairly decentralized, but like they are getting better. Like Curve at some point was really fully controlled by one DAO, and like what we saw is that when it was fully controlled just by one DAO, it was actually this turned out into a massive lobbying power, and a lot of things were like happening behind closed doors in terms of like internal politics or between DAOs, and it was really, really hard to try to like reverse that power play. And now like Fortunately, Curve is like much more decentralized in terms of like the delegates. But yes, there is a real risk that whenever you delegate to someone, like this person, like this, all this, it really becomes lobbying. And yeah, so yeah, there are like some checks that needs to be done, and we need to ensure that there is a sufficient amount of people that you can delegate to. That's really important. Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I think I was just thinking about your original question about like voter apathy, and I was thinking, what would it look like if every DAO had every token holder vote? Like you had to vote, and so you had 100% participation. Then the question is just like, is that better or worse? And I think that it's only better for some DAOs, and those ones are the ones where like you maybe do want to have more participation. An example would be like UMA, for example, where it's better that you have the average of everybody. In order to make sure that your oracle always performs, like it's like that's probably going to be correct. If like more people are making a decision, it's probably going to be correct. But there's some where it doesn't really make a difference, right? Like it's fine to have like a small group of people; it doesn't make much difference. And that's kind of where I was thinking that voter apathy mostly is something that we tackle because we have this sense that more people should vote. Like more people should vote, but it's like sometimes it's misguided, right? It doesn't make much of a difference. So yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Thank you, Vaughan. Does anyone else have any final comments on voter apathy? No? Okay. No. Emotional. Okay, bringing us to the final quarter of this discussion. And the title of the conversation is Everything Fine? Q, you actually mentioned a lot about Curve DAO, one of the only revenue-generating DAOs there are, and actually printing money, right? When we speak about DAOs, we conflate about 25 or so varying different mechanisms, from philanthropic DAOs to VC DAOs to blah, 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 blah. But the core concept of DAOs, stemming from the BitShares days and the DAX and so on, right, all on the forums, was these kind of like corporations, so these intergalactic international corporations. So my question to you as the panel is, what's the future for for-profit DAOs? Should DAOs only live as public goods? Or should we even have DAOs at all?
I will go first. I'm ready. Yeah, let's go. Should we have for-profit DAOs? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with for-profit anything. Like you can do for-profit things, it's fine. You probably shouldn't have for-profit DAOs that could just be for-profit companies. So like corporations, like if they can make profit there's no reason there should be a DAO, unless a DAO is adding some value or some property that the corporation doesn't have. I can't think of an example of that right now, but you could argue that, let's say, Maker at some point was producing a profit, and that profit was going to people who held Maker. You could argue that you could not build Maker as a centralized company, and so it's absolutely fine that it produces profits and that people can claim those profits. That's an example. Should we have public goods DAOs? I think public goods DAOs are the like unlock for DAOs. That's actually the thing that we should build. That's the new thing that we can explore. We have a way of making profits. We have a very, very broken way of funding public goods through governments and taxation and grants and charity and so on. And like that would be an incredible thing to be able to build. I don't think we're there yet. And what was your third DAO? Your third type of DAO? Not for profit.
Public goods. Or new types entirely. Do we need them entirely?
New types entirely. Yeah, new types entirely. I mean, I don't know what they are, but you could imagine some like very interesting designs that we haven't seen yet. We're still very much at the beginning when it comes to like designing these kinds of organizations. But the fact remains that we have all these other types of very large organizations, nations, religions, corporations, and now we have DAOs. So I'm sure we're going to design things that you just could not have before. And you see very small examples of this. A great example of this is ClimaDAO. I don't know if anyone in here is in ClimaDAO.
What?
ClimaDAO.
Yeah, carbon credits.
That is like it's just like a Telegram group, but there's something different about it like than just a Telegram group. Like it has like little chapters, and I think there's something interesting about what DAOs could be that we haven't really explored just yet. So yeah, like super excited for those. But public goods DAOs really, I think, are the ones that we should be really funding and spending
The main
time on.
stressor, yeah. Do, would you agree with that?
Well, I think that we are definitely seeing a lot of groups, like I wouldn't say like companies per se, but groups and interests of using the word DAO. Like they literally just put the word DAO
Right.
and just say it's a DAO. But a lot of times it is basically a company just trying to do ICO and kind of raise money, right? And then, so I wouldn't say that those would be like the new type per se, because this is something that's also very in practice. It's like if you're a company, let's say you're a company or group, right? if you have a pressure from token holders and then your equity holders, who do you want to listen to first? And then this is actually a very practice question, especially in Asia, because a lot of like mid-sized and big corporations in Asia, they have equity and they were even listed on those big exchanges, like traditional exchanges, but now they also have tokens. And then the history have shown that they, of course, screw over their DAO holders and then just help the equity holders. So I think that in reality, it's kind of hard to mix the both because sure, when the market is good, sure, it might be okay. But when the market is bad, if they violate, let's say, those token holders, sure, they might get sued. If they violate the equity holders, they for sure go to jail. Unless you're in Korea, then you can buy the judge, but that's a different story. But so in that case, you can imagine that it just like doesn't really mix too well. Like it's possible, but I just saw that in theory, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, just on that point. So your question was, do we need DAOs at all? Yes, I think we do. The first one is there are DAOs that generate profits today. I think classic example is Shapeshift, right? So when Eric built Shapeshift, at some point I think he even wrote a post and he talked about a bit how the cost of managing Shapeshift across multiple jurisdictions from a legal perspective ended up costing Shapeshift millions of dollars in legal fees, to the point where he was like, this doesn't really make sense. So he ended up shutting down the equity company and just did Shapeshift as a DAO, right? You can argue how well that works today, but it certainly is a cost minimization exercise. The second reason why DAOs should work, or why we should have them versus not, is an example that you gave, which is the conflict of companies that issue two instruments with different interests. The example I would give here is Audius, Spotify on blockchain, right? So when Runil built Audius, it was initially an equity company. He raised money from Silicon Valley, him and Forrester, because they came out of Stanford, and then they shut down the equity company. And now Audius is fully a token-based system. So you have an alignment of interest if everyone holds one asset as opposed to two, which you wouldn't otherwise necessarily have. Note that the holding more than one asset doesn't just refer to token and equity. You can have multiple types of equity and classes of equity and all this kind of stuff. These are reasons why I think we should have DAOs versus not.
Yeah, I mean, just to come back as well onto the point regarding like having a company and as well having a DAOs. Like, I think, like, I mean, a lot of, I'm seeing that in France at least, but a lot of projects right now are actually having the two, and they are actually exploring. Like more and more projects are exploring doing that because for the simple reason that if you're a DAO, at some point, like you need like your contributors need to make a living, and generally like they need to off-ramp the fiat, right? Or like you need to make like deals with like external providers for whatever Vercel or I don't know, like AWS, right? And you need to have like a company, to have an entity there. So that's the reason why like a lot of like I don't know angled more for like Curve, Aave, even the Stack DAO soon, like. You need to have like the two. You need to have like a token, and then you need to have some equity. After that, how do you try to align that? Is different. So that's the reason why it's a whole like legal work and how to structure it, and how like what do you put, like where do you put the IP, what do you put the code, what do you put like whatever. Yeah. So these are like the practical questions that you have to think about, because like a DAO existing like just on its own, it's really tricky. It's like almost like a utopia, because like people at some point into off-ramp, or they will go into illegality to some extent. But DAOs, as I mean, they could be functioning like, and I think like they are important. Like if you have like a code which is like incensurable on your protocol, you have an ancient governance like that is making sure that whatever any government is trying to do, like for example like Uniswap or Curve, they are trying to like to shut it down. Like the code will still operate, and like they cannot put a gun to the head onto the head of the founder and say like you shut it down. Right. So. Yeah, like there are some like interesting innovation and products out there that are like necessary for the benefit of like the crypto evolution. But yeah, there is a lot of garbage. And as Du was saying, like DAOs, like at some point, like 2 years ago, like you just slapped DAOs onto any project and you were embracing Minion, and that was all the craze. But at some point, it's gonna fade, I believe.
In London, like every day of the week, they have like MonDAO, TuesDAO, WedDAO, ThursDAO, FriDAO, and it's basically just events. Anyway, Sorry. Thank you for that. Guys, when you have 5 minutes left, I would like to know the best use case that, like, okay, you're getting interviewed tomorrow by the New York Times, and they're like, we want to know the best use case of a DAO, and we're going to shill this to like the entire world. So what is the best DAO in your mind, and why? And it can't be your own, so it can't be MCV, okay, or Hydra or something like that. Who wants to start? We'll move on to audience questions after this for about 15 minutes. You can go after this if you want.
Important.
Come on, expert.
Guys, this is the easiest question of the day, surely.
Oh, okay, so like, I'm probably gonna joke with the New York Times that DAO is the best at giving you the Netflix show, like the series every week, because there's so much drama happening. But I would say I'll probably recommend. I mean, yes, I know that I'm kind of biased toward maybe MakerDAO, but the reason why I would point out as the best example is like you can see everything going on there. You can see how much people are getting paid, the drama going on, how much people are getting embezzled as well. Like so, in a way, all the good and bad people can see it. Like that's also one of the benefits of DAO, right? Because we say DAO as a decentralized autonomous organization where people actually you can see how people decisions are made and how people try to cheat the system as well. Like in traditional system, you cannot see any of that. But when we had this panel, we talk about like what's happening behind the scene. One of the benefits of DAO is that actually you can see it. Like if it's like a true DAO, you can see what's happening behind the scene, even from the front seat. So I think that I'll probably explain that, and I'll probably also talk a lot about to the reporter about like but don't get in too much into DAO. It's bad for your mental health, things like that.
Thank you, though. Best DAO.
Yeah, best DAO. I mean, I love MakerDAO. I think it's awesome. It's one of the only ones where there's like people trying to actually work on the organization itself, as well as like building the protocol. But my choice would be RANDAO, which I think is it's like the perfect DAO. Does anyone know what RANDAO is? So no, it's actually apparent. Like RANDAO is
Can you
like
spell it? Sorry. Can you spell it?
RANDAO.
RANDAO.
AO. Yeah.
Dot.
That's it. It's just RANDAO.
Okay.
Like if you find it on GitHub, it's actually used for randomness, just like the random number generator in by Chainlink.
Like a VRF.
Yeah, you just want to create some randomness, but it's a DAO, and it's really simple. It's like you give it a number, and then people pay it to get randomness out, and the money gets distributed to people who have given it numbers. It's super simple, and it's at the core of Ethereum. Like it's actually they use it to generate randomness to select like validators. And it's just like the perfect DAO. It's like it makes perfect sense. It makes money. It's profitable to use. It's just this thing that's like super simple. That's I think the best DAO. It's like, but it shows you that we can only really make DAOs really work when it's very simple. I think when it gets more complex and you want like a general DAO, it gets really hard. I think Vitalik calls them type 1 and type 2 DAOs. Like type 1 DAOs are just like narrow. They do one thing, and then type 2 are like general. They can make decisions over anything.
Yeah. Let's go. Rolf Q. You got one in mind? After you, Rolf.
Wow, I think this one's hard. I think I would say DAOs are not what you think they are, and the most successful one's Bitcoin. And then I explain why. Not Ethereum.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also like a little bit biased, but because I'm close to the project. But yeah, I would say Curve. Seeing like what they've done, like with the on-chain governance, it's been quite impressive. The way that it is now decentralized, the way that it is profitable, the code that they keep on shipping, and how much at the heart of DeFi has been like truly impressive. And now like with the release of the CRV USD.
I agree. I think Carve is one of the most impressive DAOs, and every now and then on Twitter, like every 2 weeks, they'll be like, "Oh, we just generated another $70 million this year in projected revenue, right, for these small tweaks and changes." They're always just like, it seems to be innovating.
Yeah, they are keeping on the innovation. Like what they just released with the new stablecoin is actually truly impressive. It's going to generate a lot of revenue for the Curve token holders, the ones that staked it. Yeah, I'm really excited to see it grow and.
So we have MakerDAO, Bitcoin. RANDAO, MakerDAO, Bitcoin, and Curve. Okay, go to shake those. We're going to do audience questions. Can we just have a bit small clap for our panelists?
Thanks. It was a cool question about like, do we need any DAO? I just want to make it maybe improve it a bit. Like I think that maybe we need them, but how many we need them? Like we need less DAOs or more DAOs? Just have like a small take that like a couple of years ago when blockchain just started, we have some issues when there were a lot of projects like decentralized chairs on Ethereum. And there was a question like, do we need this on Ethereum? Do we need blockchain here? Do we need DAO in some things? Like I just want to show some examples, like for example, Uniswap DAO, like, do we need actually DAO here? I mean, like Uniswap V2 was launched without any DAO, and after they launched a DAO. Do we need, in some cases, a DAO right now? What do you think? Maybe we need less DAOs right now? Like, what is your point here? It will be cool to take a look at on it.
I know that I will be very biased to say we need more DAOs because there will mean more revenue. But I think in reality, but actually contrary to it, I think that I can make a logical argument that like we actually need fewer DAOs, but actual DAOs, not just fake. Like I know it's kind of odd to say fake DAOs, but there are just many organizations that just put the title DAO, but it's actually not a DAO. Nothing is transparent. There's no decision. So in that case, then yeah, we need like fewer. But I think what we need is that we need to seriously think about the vision as well as like the philosophy, but also practice side to DAO as well. Because I think right now, like the name DAO is it's similar to talking about crypto itself, right? People want to put crypto and then have everything on crypto, dating on crypto, whatever on crypto, right? But then, it comes to it, a lot of it was the vaporware, right? So I think the same thing, like just putting the word DAO is actually not a DAO, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we need as well a little bit maybe to remember like why so many DAOs appeared at some point. This was because actually like you were just floating a token, and it was a quick way for if you had an idea to raise some money and just like get on with it and just like roll on with your idea, right? But as we're gonna see, probably, I mean, hopefully more like a clarity on like the regulation, and like it's gonna be easier like to like if you have an idea like to raise money and like create a company, and actually you just roll with your own project as a company, run as a company. But you in that case so most of the time you don't need a token, or you don't need a to make a DAO. It just can be like any company that is just running like a blockchain project, and that's it. But like 2-3 years ago, it was just like, okay, I have an idea, I'm just going to float the token and get on with it. But like, hopefully, the regulation is going to help, and we're going to see maybe less DAO, but like more quality ones.
You asked a question. So, do you have a DAO?
No. Kind of. It's more like a meme, like it's.
Isn't DAO a delegate in your DAO, like the biggest delegate? Yes. Yes, he is.
How?
I like not officially represent the funding, so
Okay.
I'm like a just contributor. I'm like
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Rolf, you had something to add to this?
I think I don't really care if we have more of or less. I just care if they do more or less good stuff. So to the degree it's like asking, do we need more organizations or less? I don't know. I do know that I think Reddit would be great if it had some DAO components today. I think it'd be great if, in my earlier talk I mentioned universities. If universities had some DAO components, I think that would be great. Yeah, so all else equal, I think we need more DAOs that do the real work, kind of like Doe said and Q said.
I just want to,
Follow-up?
sorry for the follow-up, I just want to continue a bit about that like if there are some real DAOs, but you can make a real DAO, but there is another way, but you can just make it automated. Like, what is the point here from your point of view? Like, is it still okay to do a real DAO if we can make it, or it's a better just to make it everything automated? I mean, like, from my point of view, sometimes DAO is not a feature, but it's a bug, because basically you can automate everything, but instead of that, projects start to launch DAOs that actually trying to vote on these things, but actually you can just make like a line of code that rules if the valuation is like higher than this one, just make price lower, and that's it.
So I see exactly what you're saying, and I feel like people create this unnecessary friction for many reasons, whether raising money or not. But the biggest reason is usually legal sufficient decentralization, right, and the barrier between that. So I feel as though most companies are creating these DAOs simply for that reason and creating that friction. But as you mentioned, like Uniswap V2 or whatever, if it's already working and it's not using a DAO and doesn't need a DAO and is going to work without a DAO, why do we need it? You probably don't. You just need it for like some sort of protection, right? And I think that's mostly it. Sir, gentlemen?
All right, we've seen some recent DAO shenanigans. The one that kind of comes to mind with me is what happened with Arbitrum, where the team basically did what they did and then used their very first vote to kind of, tell them that this is what they're doing. So there was actually no community engagement. But the outcry from the community actually changed what the end result of that actual transfer was going to be. So from your guys' opinion, what do you think of that whole debacle? And do you really think that teams like Arbitrum and their caliber type teams will actually think twice before doing what they did again?
Who'd like to answer that?
No, actually, it was interesting. So one of those memes that's like, oh, that's a bold move, that kind of thing. It was one of that, but actually it didn't turn out well, right? Because you can imagine that if they did it, because initially when the voting comes out, most people vote in favor. Because let's be honest, even in governance, most people, I think half of people literate, so they don't actually read it proposal. But for this time, the reason why it kind of flipped it was initially the yes was kind of winning, but then some of the people pointed out some of the weird parts, right? And then it became more, I would say, makes sense to review the proposal again, and then eventually no was the majority, and then Arbitrum had to come out and say how it happened. So I do think that it changed it. But I don't think it changed for better, to be honest. I think that it actually made projects not even do that, right? Because yes, because if you're a protocol and you now know that there's a chance that when you make a proposal, there's a chance that it might fail, then what you're gonna do? You're going to try to hide it, right? And then most of DAOs are not sufficient enough to actually check how it's working, right? So I know that it's a small win, but I think the long term, instead of DAOs thinking from the project, right? Instead of the team thinking okay, so from now on, we need to make sure that this is more transparent. I think what happened was that, okay, so actually the community might check it and might not like it. So let's try to hide it. This is something what Arbitrum did, as well as others. What they do is that they like to split the vote into bundles. So instead of having it into the unpopular vote, they would split the unpopular one with the popular one and then bundle together. So it's like a trick, but at the same time, they also know that the governance has a limited attention, right? So, so once again, it's positive, but at the same time, I think it also leads them to do more tricks, and the governance doesn't have enough attention span to check it, which is why we need more people to participate in the first place, even if they're misguided, so they can point it out.
Does anyone have anything to add to that? No?
Really quick, to combine the two questions, I think the reason why you would want to have a DAO is because of protection in case things like this happen.
Right.
So if you did not, you have less options to express your choice. This is why I think a lot more things should be a DAO, but it doesn't mean they need to be active every single day. I think that's a very bad idea. They'd only need to be active in cases that really, really matter. Removing a president, Reddit turning off its API, trying to monetize its API, Arbitrum trying to make a really critical decision with token transfers, right? ENS, there's a lot of examples.
Thank you. Final questions, gentlemen?
Okay. So I hear stories about making profit in DAOs, and then if you make a profit in DAOs, why do you need a DAO? So I don't ever hear anyone talking about building conventional for-profit companies, which is hard, takes a lot of effort, and then using DAOs as clients for what you're trying to build, because the people are ultimately what any company will sell to. And now if all the people come together and have a consensus on what's needed in their life, and then pay for it through a for-profit company generating that product, seems really sensible. Now, I'll just give you a thought experiment, which I like to play with. It's kind of crazy, but maybe not so crazy. Two guys in a garage developed the best search engine in the world called Google. Funny name, no one believes it at the time. Why would a search engine be of any value? And they needed money to scale that search engine and beat Yahoo. So they went to a DAO. And the DAO went, shit, this is a great idea. I think we'll fund it. We have $1 billion in our treasury. Could you give us 10% back on anything you get advertising? To the DAO, not to me individually, but to the DAO to sustain it? And they went, yeah, good idea. Give me the 50 million. So venture capitalists did that, made a fortune. But imagine a DAO making a fortune from getting 10% of Google's revenues every quarter.
Sounds like
Imagine that, right? Not bad, right? But it's the people actually giving the data to Google to make them rich, which would have been the community that invested in them using their search engine over Yahoo. So that's a thought experiment, right? But this is the idea that's been in my brain for like a year and a half. DAOs should be clients to quality, small, for-profit companies that are highly efficient.
I mean, these are the right people to ask.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Like, pharma is the most inefficient system on earth.
Are you familiar with Metacartel Ventures, like that whole scene? You should speak to Rolf after this.
I will.
He'll give you the whole spiel and lowdown. But you know what? You're totally right, and I think that's a lot of things that like people miss. Blatantly obvious thing. It's like, why are we not just doing that stuff that's right in front of us? It's just clear, yeah.
The needs, the essentials. Please.
Thank you. Let's go have some. Oh, you motherfucker. Yeah, sure. Take your time, take your time.
Yeah, it's to you, Rolf. So you said you mentioned sampling. You mentioned so basically sampling. I guess you were mentioning token holders of governance tokens, and I think it definitely makes sense for an investment DAO. But would it make sense for a protocol DAO? Because you are just sampling the token holders. So that's a sample of the token holder distribution. But so why for? It seems to me like basically so I'm going to try to give my answer. It's like what you care about when you have a protocol is stakeholders, which is only matching when you have an investment DAO.
Not necessarily an investment DAO. I mean, do you think Uniswap is an investment DAO?
No, but
Okay,
then
good.
yeah.
Good. So my only point is it's a mathematical point. So this is literally how most of science today is conducted, is how do you choose the groups on which you test things like drugs or things like, I don't know, psychological experiments and behaviors, is if I work at Stanford, I'm a professor at Stanford, I do a behavioral study, I need to have a control group, right? And then I need to have a group that I expose to the actual condition that I want to test, i.e. people wearing red t-shirts are more active during the day. Like some people believe that shit. Maybe it's true, right? And so then people that wear just random fucking t-shirts, right? And then the people that wear the red t-shirts, and then the people that wear, let's say, blue t-shirts, right? So the question is, how do I select these people? I don't have to select every person in the world to then look at what the effect is by putting like literally 6 billion people into these 3 groups. I can only take a small group of people. But how do I make sure that that the result is reliable so that the people who weren't in the group know whether to wear red t-shirts or not? I have to do it in a representative way. So my point is really more about when I sample people, I eliminate what we call variance, undesired variance, so they're just kind of representative. So I don't think it matters on the type of stakeholders. It's just any group.
Yeah. So no, actually, so let's forget about the investment DAO case that I was trying to make. It depends on the set on which you are sampling. So what I'm saying is that when you consider Uniswap, the token holders are actually not the people you want to sample from. If you want, it depends what you want to do. If you want to make them richer, then that's probably a set you want to pick. If you want to make the protocol most useful, that's not the set you want to pick. You want to pick from. Does it make sense?
It makes sense if you believe that the world where increasing usefulness is not correlated to getting people rich in the long term. So all else equal, I think, in the long term, across many systems, the more useful things you do, the richer these systems should get. I'm not saying everything is equally and fairly distributed, right? But yeah.
Yeah, but so I guess then agreed on that. So I guess the question which is left is then whenever you're sampling, you might give an attack vector to whoever can game the sample by intervening in the unitoken supply, like by entering, being sampled, taking advantage. So yeah, I guess that's the limit of because I love sampling. I think that's underused. But yeah, I guess that
agreed. Just really quick, the traditional way to block that snapshot implemented today is just as of a certain block, you say you can only vote up until that block, and then you sample after that snapshot. Right, as of let's say block, I don't know, 20,000. We had block 20,100, which let's say is 100 blocks. That's a bad idea. 1,000 blocks is like a week. And you said a week ago, we're going to look at who the token holders were, and we'll sample the addresses. We'll sample 100. But yeah, I mean, I hear your point. Yeah.
Thanks so much. That's a good question. Okay, everyone, you're free to go. Guys and Negronis, thank you. Thank you.